Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first webinar in our summer school series, or that's how we called it. Summer, lots of sun, well, not so much sun at the moment in Belgium, but anyway, lots of sun and a little bit more quiet time, so a perfect time to review some topics we thought in a webinar. This first one is about pdfToolbox Desktop. It will be a not so technical one. It's an introduction to pdfToolbox Desktop. Some of the other webinars in our summer school series will be much more technical than this one. There is a webinar every Wednesday for the next 6 weeks. You can find the full schedule on the 4Ps website, 4ps.com, and you can register there for any of them if you haven't done so already. pdfToolbox Desktop, an introduction, is what we're talking about today, and as you can see, I have prepared a very simple presentation. It consists of one content slide that says demo, which is what I like the best. No presentations, but only software. Now, pdfToolbox Desktop, I'm assuming that you either heard of it, you've looked at a webinar about it at some point, you've seen a demo, or you've just downloaded the trial software from our website or the Kala software website. It actually comes in two different flavors, so you could choose how to launch it. You can launch it as a standalone application, which is what I have already done, and then it runs as an application that doesn't need anything else to be installed on your system. So you need no Adobe software whatsoever to be installed, for example. It's its own application, everything it needs, it has a board. Or you could choose to launch Acrobat. You need Acrobat Pro in that case. And if I launch Acrobat, you'll see a plugins menu, and then in that plugins menu, there are a number of menu items for pdfToolbox. The functionality between the plugin and the standalone version is just about the same, and you can actually install both on the same system, and you can run both at the same time if you want. So whether you use a plugin inside of Acrobat or you use the standalone outside of Acrobat, I don't really care. We don't really care. It's a matter of taste and what you feel most comfortable with. For demos, I always use the standalone version because then you don't have all of the Acrobat user interface around it, and it's much more clear what the functionality of pdfToolbox itself is. Just remember that it comes in both forms and that you can choose to use either of them. So what I've done is I've launched the pdfToolbox Desktop standalone application, and that opens up this window. If you've just downloaded this from the internet, you might have a yellow bar at the top that says something about this being a trial version, and it might also say something about you needing to activate pdfToolbox Desktop before it can run. If you don't know how to do that, there is a webinar recording on the 4Ps support site. That's support.4ps.com, where that recording explains the activation process you have to go through, either for a trial version or for a fully licensed version. So when you've bought a license key for the product. I've already done that, and what I can do now is take a PDF file and just drop that on top of my pdfToolbox Desktop window. And those of you who've seen webinars before know that I have a little thing with penguins, and I always manage to create custom demo files for these webinars, so I've done the same thing after the soccer match of yesterday, of course. But back to PDF, I've opened this PDF file. You can see it displayed. This is actually a good display, and with that I mean that any transparency effects you may have in the PDF, any overprint you may have, anything like that, anything that could be complex in a modern PDF file is rendered correctly, is displayed correctly inside of pdfToolbox. So the view that you get here is exactly the same view as what you would get in Adobe Acrobat, or when you print this on an Adobe RIP. The reason for that is that there is actually Adobe technology inside of pdfToolbox. pdfToolbox licenses a number of libraries from Adobe. That includes the display engine, it includes the transparency flattening engine, it includes the distiller engine to go from PostScript to PDF, and a number of other bits and pieces. So what you see here is exactly what you would get in a production workflow. And of course, that's important. What you can also already see is that at the bottom, I have some information about the file itself. I'm looking at page 1 from a total of 1 pages for this document, so it's a single page PDF, and I can see the size of the PDF file as well. If there would be an output intent in this file, or if the file would be in conformance with a PDFX standard, then you would see that information at this bottom part of the user interface as well. pdfToolbox Desktop can do a number of things for you. And to explain what the sort of things are that it can do, what I will do is go to Tools, and I'll bring up the Switchboard. The Switchboard is this little window. It looks more or less like an iPhone. It has a number of different buttons on it, and each of these buttons represents a group of similar functions. And what I'll do to begin with is I'll start with quality control of this PDF file, Preflight, or checking whether this file is correct and potentially adjusting it so that it's correct. And to do that, I'll go to Standards. So I click on the Standards button, and that lists a number of different Preflight standards that are supported by pdfToolbox Desktop. You can see a number of the ISO standards on the top row here, and then you can see a number of Gantt workgroup specifications on the other 2 rows. What I can do now is I can think about how do I want to use this file, what is its purpose, and for example, this could be a full page ad for the World Cup, and then I go to magazine ads if this is going to be published in a magazine that makes sense. And you can see that I now have no options whatsoever. The only thing I can do is execute or batch. The purpose of the switchboard is to give you access to a lot of the functionality that is inside of pdfToolbox, but to do so in a very user-friendly, easy way. And that means that a lot of the complexity, but also some of the power of pdfToolbox is hidden if you explore the product through the switchboard. And I'll show you the Profiles window briefly later on, and all of the power of pdfToolbox is available in that Profiles window, but the complexity is a little bit higher as well. But as long as you stick to the switchboard, you'll get a very easy to use user interface for all of the functionality, or the major functionality in the product. In any case, you get a little description of what this functionality does. In this case, it prepares a PDF file for use as a magazine ad. If there are any options that you can choose, they will appear in the window underneath that description, and then I can either choose execute, which will run this function on the file that I have open in my main window, or I can choose batch, and batch will allow me to select a folder, and then it will run that functionality that I have on all of the documents in that folder. This is not a fully automatic solution. It's not a server. There is a product that is called pdfToolbox Server, which does allow full automation, but the batch functionality is a great tool if someone, for example, sends you 10 documents and you want to do the same function on all 10 of these documents. So remember that you have that batch functionality if you need it. For now, the only thing I need here is execute, which will, in this case, prepare my PDF for magazine ads. So let me click that. Because this is functionality that will change my document, it will try to make it compliant with the magazine ad specification. pdfToolbox asks me for a name for that new document, and I will give it a name and save it on my desktop. It will think for a second, and what it actually does is run through the document and try to make it compliant. It saves that with a new name. You can see that the name of the document in my main window changed, and you can see a sad sign in the switchboard that indicates that not everything went according to plan. So the file that I have here, I was not able to fully modify so that it's compliant with the magazine ads specification. However, some things were changed. If I look at the bottom of this window now, I can see a pdfX1A badge. The magazine ad specification from the Ghent workgroup is based on the ISO pdfX1A standard, and apparently pdfToolbox was capable of making this file pdfX1A compliant, so that's already a good thing. And you can also see that it included an ICC profile, in this case an ISO-coated ICC profile in this document as part of the process of making it pdfX1A compliant. So now the question is, of course, if some of these things went okay, which things did not go okay? And I have a report button. If I click that, that gives me a list. Let me move that to the side. It gives me a list of everything pdfToolbox did while doing this quality control or pre-flight. I have a list of items that were fixed, changed, all of the items with a little wrench icon in front of them. All of those things are fixed in my document. And then I have two items that have not been fixed that were a problem. The first one has a red cross, meaning it's a pre-flight error, and that usually means that it's something that could be a problem in production. The second item is a warning message, and a warning message might be a problem and should be checked out, but it might also not be a problem. I get these messages, these fixes, and the errors and warning because of the fact that I used the magazine ads specification. If I would use a different specification or a different pre-flight profile, to use pdfToolbox terminology, if I would use a different pre-flight profile, I could get a totally different list of fixes, errors, and warnings. Now, it's nice to know that there is an error, and I can click on this little triangle button here to see where these errors occur, and then I can see that this is about images that are on page 1, which makes sense. It's a single-page PDF file. Unfortunately, knowing that it's on page 1 doesn't exactly tell me which of these images actually caused that problem. But I have a Show in Snap button here at the bottom. If I click that, I can now select any of the errors or warnings in my list. And then the image that the object that caused that particular error, in this case an image, is shown in that Show in Snap window. So it's the German flag I have at the top here that causes the problem, and the Brazilian flag I have at the bottom that caused the second instance of that problem. In other words, the resolution of those two images is less than 150 dpi, which, according to the settings of this pre-flight profile, is an error. It's something that will not work in a production workflow. I can also look at ink coverage, but unfortunately ink coverage is one of those items that I cannot see in the Show in Snap window. Why? Because it's a problem that is associated with the complete page. It's actually the amount of ink that is used on the page that is too high. So my Show in Snap area here doesn't help me much for this particular warning message. However, this is a good time to introduce some of the other functionality in pdfToolbox. If I go to View and then I go to Visualize Ink Coverage, and you can see that there is a longer list of visualizer items that I could select, but in this case I'm interested in ink coverage. If I select that, I get a different view on my document, and in that view I can see which parts of the page are higher than the ink limit that I've set. Now, I'm using an ICC profile that is allowing 300% ink, so it would be more appropriate to set my ink limit to 300%. And you can see that the display here on the left-hand side changed to reflect that new ink limit that I've set. In fact, the only item that is now still a problem is the black area in that German flag that I have at the top. And the color code, the fact that this is orange, shows me that I have more than 30% more ink than this 300%. So more than likely, this is something that is close to 400%. If I lower that ink limit to something else, if I would set it to 150, which is very, very low, and I'm only doing this for the purpose of this demonstration, if I lower that to 150, then you get a color-coded preview of anything in the document that is higher than 150% ink. So this is a very nice tool to, in a glimpse, get an overview of which areas on the page might be causing a problem. In this particular instance for ink coverage, but I could also use this to look at separations, spot color separations, or just any individual separation in the document. I can I can use this to examine image resolution and which images might have a resolution that is too low. I can look at objects that are too thin, like hairlines or small text. And I can use it to look at a safety zone or output preview in my document that I have open. So the visualizer, once you've run Preflight, that visualizer is a very useful tool to further examine in a very visual way the document that you just preflighted. I've accomplished what I wanted to do. I've seen where that potential ink coverage problem is. And let me close that visualizer preview down again. And now my next question, of course, is, well, I've proven that there are some issues with this document, and I would now, assuming that I'm a printer, for example, or a publisher, I would now like to communicate this information back to my client, the person that submitted the file to me. I could, I guess, take a screenshot of my screen and send that to them, but that's not very user-friendly. And the better way to do that is in this window that displays all of my Preflight results, I have a Create Report button, and if I click that one, I get a dialog box that allows me to create Preflight reports. And I will save my report on the desktop. I now have to choose between which report I want, and I'm going to show you two things. The first one I want to show you is a regular PDF report. I'm specifying that I want an overview, and any details for the problems I want to highlight with comments or annotations, as they're also called by Acrobat. That's fine. Let me save that on my desktop. And what I'll do is I'll close it here. It automatically opens in pdfToolbox, but I actually want to show you how this would look to someone receiving this report and opening it up in Acrobat or in Reader. Let me open it up. You can see that I now have a first page in this PDF file that gives me an overview of the things that were fixed and the errors and warnings. This is the same information I had in that result window inside of pdfToolbox. And if I scroll down, I have the actual page from my PDF file included in my report, but now I have a number of annotations on top. I always have this blue annotation, which tells me that this was the file called 2014 and so on, and that the profile that I used was magazine ads, and that the report was created today, just a few minutes ago. So that's information about when this report was generated. And then I have annotations on top of the page. The first annotation is a yellow one because it's an error message, a warning message rather, and that annotation gives me the actual warning that was caused and the description that was included in the Preflight profile. If I scroll down for a second, you can see that I also have this red annotation both on the German flag at the top and the Brazilian flag at the bottom. If I click on that one, that explains an error message. It's a red annotation, so it's an error message that tells me that there is a problem with the resolution of the image indicated by that annotation. So this is a PDF file with an overview of all of the problems in that were found during Preflight, let me put it that way. And it's a PDF file that highlights the objects that caused those problems in a very precise way, and it highlights them on top of the original file, which makes it easy for my client to now realize where those errors actually occurred. I'll quit Acrobat again, and I'll go back to pdfToolbox. Now what I want to do is do this once more. I'll remove these files that I have here. Let me reopen my original file and then go through this process again, called that webinar. But this time, instead of generating a report with comments, I'm going to choose something else. And in this case, I'm going to choose PDF Report Custom. That's a report that is generated based on an HTML template that you could adjust. I will not go into any of the details because that would carry us way too far into a technical discussion. Just remember that there are other types of reports. I will use the one that is based on a template that I can modify. And the template that I want is, I'll use a standard one that is included in pdfToolbox. And before I hit save, let me point out that there is also an XML and a text report. And of course, in an automated workflow, the fact that you have an XML report, if you use pdfToolbox Server, that fact is very, very useful because that will allow you to create a further automated workflow based on what is found by pdfToolbox during Preflight. pdfToolbox preflights the file that generates that XML file, and then a script or another process could pick up that XML file, integrate it into an older system, into an MIS system, or any kind of workflow or web-based or workflow system that then takes that information and does something intelligent with that. We're not doing automation right now, so I'm going to stick to my custom PDF report, and let me just again save that to my desktop. You'll see that it opens up in pdfToolbox again, and that's good enough for what I want to do. And as you can see, this report looks completely different. It's much more concise, and it just gives me information about what happened during Preflight and information about the document that was preflighted and where it was preflighted. The only thing that is important to remember is that you have this, this report available as well if you ever want to use it, and that anything about this report, the colors, the images, the text, what information is displayed, that all of that can also be modified. So you could make a report template that uses your own branding and that makes it more easily recognizable for your clients, and a marketing vehicle, if you want, for your brand as you report back to your clients. So that's all I wanted to say about that. Let me close that down and let's go back to the switchboard for a second. I can always go back to the home page in the switchboard by clicking this little home icon. And it's important to realize that even though we've mainly talked about pre-flight and fixing PDF documents so far, that pdfToolbox can do much more than that. Of course, this quality control aspect, the pre-flight that we've seen, and the fact that you can fix PDF files to comply with a standard is a very important aspect of what pdfToolbox can do for you. But it can do much more, and these things are useful both in the desktop version and in the automated version. What are these things? Well, you can get a nice overview, as I said before, by simply looking at the switchboard and looking through the different categories in the switchboard. And I'll give you a number of highlights. I don't want to make this webinar longer than an hour, so I'm not going to go into all of the details, but let me give you some highlights. The first one that we could look at is the Arrange button. Under Arrange, I have the possibility to use the Imposition Engine that exists inside of pdfToolbox. And what I'll do is I'll go to Step and Repeat. Again, this is simply an example, but what I've set up here is for this document that is basically an A4, I want to do Step and Repeat on an A3 in landscape mode, and I'm just going to run this as is, so execute again, and that gives me 2 copies of my document next to each other. What you also saw, and I'll just go back here and do revert, so I have my original document again. What you also see here is that there, in this case, are a number of options. So I have options that I can change in this particular case. So let me put some space in between these pages that I want to step and repeat. And instead of putting it on an A3, I'm going to say minimal size. That tells pdfToolbox to calculate what the size of the page is that it needs. I'm going to ask for cut marks. And let me run that again. And as you can see, now I get a page that is slightly larger. It's not exactly an A3 anymore. I get a centimeter in between the 2 copies that I have positioned, and I get these cut marks for each repetition of the document. So if I go back to the Arrange group in the switchboard, the functionality here allows me to do both simple and complex impositions. The simple ones, things like step and repeat, an end-up, fill page, creating a booklet, and so on, are exactly what I've shown so far. You set a number of properties and then you hit execute, and you have an impositioned page that you can then use to do whatever you have to do with it. The impose action, and again, I'm not going to go into any details, but the impose action will allow you to generate something that is much more complex in terms of imposition. And I'll just open up this original document again, and I'll run this impose action that I have selected. I haven't tried this before, but we'll see what happens here. There you go, that's perfect. So what this did was it took my original page, my original document, and it put it on top of an approval sheet that I previously prepared. And now I have something that I could send to the customer or print and have them sign so that they can approve with this before it goes into production. This is the same imposition engine as the one that is used for the step and repeat and so on, but in this case I have configured it in a completely different way, so I'm getting a completely different result. No more technical details than this. There are a number of webinar recordings that you can go watch, and one of them on the support.4piece.com website. One of those webinar recordings is about an hour long and talks about many of the details of the imposition engine, how you can use it, where you can find documentation about it, and how you can make your own setups, just as the one that I have been using in this example. So if you're interested, just go to our support website and have a look at that webinar recording. I'm going to close this one again. No, I don't want to save. And I'm going to reopen my original file once more. Going back to the home page, Arrange is everything that has to do with the imposition engine inside of pdfToolbox. The next one that I want to highlight is Prepress. And Prepress gives you a number of frequently used functions to clean up a document that might not be perfect and that needs to go into production. Let me show you a couple. The transparency flattener, for example, in most cases you will not run the transparency flattening capability by itself. When we did Preflight with the magazine ads, a Preflight profile before, the transparency flattener was actually included in that Preflight profile. And that's because the Preflight profile was based on PDFX1A. PDFX1A does not support or allow transparency, so pdfToolbox does flattening as part of that process. But if you ever want to flatten a file, you have easy access to the transparency flattener, the same transparency flattener used in Adobe Acrobat. You have easy access to that here. I go back and let me show you another piece of functionality here, add marks. Remark that the document as I have it open here does not contain any printer marks, and that might well be an issue. And what I can do here is say add bleed marks and trim marks. I can either choose Japanese style marks, which look very different, or regular European or US marks, which I will do in this case. And I can choose the offset between the marks and my live content, and I'll just run execute, name that with marks, for example, save it on my desktop, and that gives me a file that has printer marks on it now. Now, of course, this immediately makes clear that this document has another defect, namely it has not been created correctly, which is normal. I prepared it. It was not created correctly. It does not contain bleed. This is not always easy to fix, but in some cases it can be fixed. However, I don't have a fix for that here under prepress, so let me go back in my switchboard here. And now there's two things I can do. I can go hunt through all of these categories to find something that has to do with bleed, or I can click the little loop icon here, and then I can type bleed. And I have this nice purple icon that is called Create Bleed, that can actually be found if I go back under the Pages button here. So the color can help you identify where that functionality is found in the switchboard. If I click the Pages again, I have this Create Bleed. I'll go back to it, and I have a number of different ways of creating bleed. Like I said, this will not always work, but in some cases it might actually save the day. You can either upscale the document to create the bleed that I want, but in this case, I think it will actually work if I use something that is commonly used in large format workflows, and that is creating bleed by mirroring the edges of the document. I want 5 millimeters of bleed. This is done by creating an image from this file and then creating a mirror of that image at all the borders of the document, so I can specify what the resolution is of that image that will be used. 300 dpi is fine. I'm just going to say execute. And as you can see what it did now, and you can see that because of the image of the jug here that comes pretty close to my trim box. In this case, it simply added a mirrored image around the document. And for this document, this might actually be more than enough for what I need. Is this correct now? Well, let me very quickly go back to Visualize Safety Zone. Again, the visualizer. Visualize Safety Zone, and I can choose to see the page border. I can also choose to see the bleed area. And now this red line is my trim box, and what you can see is that all of this content that was added is nicely extending the content from within the page to outside my trim box. So this should actually be fine for production now. So once more, Visualizer as a tool to inspect in a very visual way what I've done during Preflight or during the work with the switchboard. Let me close this up again and start over with my original document. And there are a few more of these switchboard items that I want to show. Let me go back to Pages and point out that there is a variety of changes that you can do to Pages. You can scale You can rotate, move content, flip a page, and also sometimes very useful, I can crop to visible. And this is most useful when you get files that were prepared in Illustrator, because many designers have a tendency of using a large artboard inside of Illustrator, and there might be some tiny piece of content somewhere inside of that artboard. Crop to visible will actually look at the bounding box of all of the objects on the page, and then it will change the bounding box to show only the content that is on that large artboard. So a number of different things that have to do with pages. I have all of them individually here with just a few options that you can see. But of course, and that's the same as what I've said before, all of these things in the switchboard can be automated, can be included in a Preflight profile. So I could have 10 different actions that I want to do on a PDF file. I could put those in a profile once, build that profile, test it, and then any file that comes in from a client, I could run that profile on to do all of those changes and then check whether the resulting file is now good enough for production. So the switchboard is great to explore. It's also great to do individual fixes. Just keep in mind that you have profiles, and that in a profile you can do a lot of checks and fixes at one time. And once I've looked at the switchboard, I'll give you just a brief look on the profile so that you can see what the possibilities are there as well. Go back to homepage and let me take you to document to have a look at that. Document is interesting because it shows you that pdfToolbox can potentially do much more than simply run something on a PDF file. Let me go to image export. I'll select PNG. I want an RGB file, perhaps with transparency. That would be RGB and an alpha channel for transparency. And I want something at 150 dpi. If I want to put it on a website, something like 72 or 96 might be more appropriate. All of these settings are what I want, and if I now click execute and I select my desktop again, as you can see, an image is created, and if I open that up in preview, I can see that pdfToolbox just took that PDF file that I had and saved an image with a specific resolution, specific image format, and color space, and so on in it. And that means that pdfToolbox can be used to create images that could be sent to a RIP even if I generate them at 300 dpi. I'm not limited to PNG. I could go back to TIFF and say I want a CMYK or even a multi-channel TIFF. So I could use these images, but, and that's the most used use case for save as image, I can also use this to create preview images, to create something that I can include on a website as a thumbnail or a preview, to create something I can include in an email message or something similar. So that is saving a PDF file that I have to something else. And next to image export, I can also save a PostScript file that is not used that much today, or I can save an EPS file. And that is actually something that a lot of our customers are still using. And save as an EPS, of course, gives you different options. Here I can choose the language level, PostScript language level, and I can choose to add marks. I can select a page range, and so on. And that will give me an EPS file for each page in the original PDF document. I'm not limited to going from PDF to something else, however. I can also look at the second row of buttons that you have here, and those allow you to go from a different file format. And let me close this and see if I can find a presentation. This is a folder that contains a PowerPoint presentation. And let me just take that PowerPoint file and drag that on top of the pdfToolbox window. And what you'll see is that what happens here is that pdfToolbox launched PowerPoint. It opened that PowerPoint file inside of PowerPoint, and then instructed PowerPoint to save a PDF file, and I end up with a PDF inside of my pdfToolbox window. As is indicated here, pdfToolbox can also convert from a number of other file formats into PDF. And in many environments, that can be a very useful thing. The environments where this is used the most are either copy shop environments, where someone walks in with a PowerPoint file or a Word file or an Excel, and they want to print that. Well, this allows you to create a good PDF file from that Office document. It's not restricted to what I just said. I'll give you the full list of file formats in a second. You can use this in a copy shop environment, or you could use this even in an automated fashion in an environment where, for example, you need to take Office memos and you need to convert those into PDF, either to be printed or to be archived. That second part, the archival possibility, is there because pdfToolbox not only supports the graphic arts standards like PDFX, but it also supports archival standards like PDFA. So you can make a PDF for archival with pdfToolbox as well. What can I convert to PDF? Well, the Office formats that I already mentioned, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, but this also works for MS Publisher, it works for Pages, it works for MS Project, Visio, for image formats, PNG, TIFF, JPEG, and for PostScript and EPS. The distiller engine from Adobe, the same engine that is used in the product called Acrobat Distiller, that distiller engine is embedded inside of pdfToolbox desktop and server. So both in the manual environment, pdfToolbox desktop, and in the automated environment of pdfToolbox server, I can automatically convert PostScript to PDF as well. Just another piece of functionality to keep in mind. This document area also contains things like adding letterhead or putting something on top of a PDF file, which could, for example, be the word preview or under consideration or proof or whatever you want to put as a stamp on top of a PDF file. That is also a possibility. Let me go back and show you one last area. I need to go back to my desktop and find my file here. And if I go back to color, for example, then you can see that there is a long list of possibilities with regards to color as well. The three main areas, again, I'm not going to go into details, but the three main areas that you have here are conversion using ICC profiles, which would allow me to convert RGB to CMYK, or convert anything to RGB or to gray, and I will show you how that works in just a second as an example. But next to ICC profile conversion, I also have functionalities for spot color that would allow me to convert spot to CMYK, or rename a spot color, or remap one spot color to another. And I have capabilities using device link profiles. You cannot create device link profiles with pdfToolbox. That would require another tool like Copra from ColorLogic, for example. But if you have device link profiles, then you can apply them on a PDF with pdfToolbox. If you have a device link profile that does ink save, for example, and Copra from ColorLogic is capable of creating such profiles, then I could run these profiles and do the actual ink saving on my PDF files with pdfToolbox using that device link conversion functionality. I promised that I was going to show this black and white conversion. It's not very spectacular, but just to show you that this indeed works as an example of an ICC profile-based conversion. Now, that's all of what I'm going to show in the switchboard. Before I show the last part, which is actually the part that has to do with profiles, and this will be short. Before I look at whether there are any questions, let me go back to pdfToolbox here for a second. I'll close that down. I'm not sure we need it again, but let me reopen my original document just to be sure. And what I want to do as a last subject here is close that switchboard, and I want to go to Tools, and under Tools, I want to open Profiles. And you can see that there are actually 3 menu items here: Profiles, Checks, and Fix-Ups. And if I click on Profiles, I get a window that has the same 3 areas: Profiles, Checks, and Fix-Ups. A profile or a Preflight profile is what is actually used by the switchboard behind the scenes in most cases. That magazine ads conversion that we did, well, that is this profile, the magazine ads profile, based on the specification from the Gantt workgroup. And what you can see is that now I have a very, very long list of profiles. Most of these profiles came with pdfToolbox Desktop. So if you install the trial version that you can download from the website, you'll get a long list of profiles that come with the application. Some of those implement PDFX standards or other ISO standards. I talked about PDF-A, PDF format for archival. Well, here you have all of the archival profiles. Some of them are based on specifications of the Gantt workgroup, like the prepress section, and some of them are simply useful other examples of what you can do. Of course, you can also create your own profiles. And if I look at this category, which has my initials, then you can see that there are a number of profiles under there that I created myself. And when you want to create your own profile, you can either click on the action button here and go to Create New pdfToolbox Profile, or I can select any of the existing profiles, for example, magazine ads, and I can add my own stuff by creating a copy. I have duplicate Callas pdfToolbox profile that creates a copy of the profile that is selected. Once it has created that copy, it will open it up so that you can edit it. And while editing a profile, again, I don't want to go into all of the technical details here because my time almost ran out. But if you look at one of these profiles, the most important part is that you'll see a list of custom checks. This is the full list of checks in that profile. You can see that some of them are set to error, that red cross again. Some of them are set to warning, the yellow exclamation mark. And I also have a list of all of the fixes in this profile. A fix is something that fixes a problem in the file. That's logical. And a check, also logical, is something that checks a certain aspect of a file or of the objects in the file. And when you run a profile, which is what we did at the very beginning of this webinar, when you run a profile, you're actually executing first all of the fixes in the document, and then afterwards you're running all of the checks that are in that profile. So if something was not properly fixed or could not be fixed, then you get a warning or an error message. You can see that the user interface in this profile editor is definitely more complex than what you have in the switchboard. However, it doesn't require that much explanation on getting going with this user interface to make your own profiles, especially not if you select something that comes close to what you need and you then make a copy that you then modify, because then you have a good starting point and it's only a matter of perhaps selecting one of these checks or fixes and modifying it so that it does exactly what you want. Okay, in very short summary, what we did is we explained what pdfToolbox is and the different flavors that you have. We looked at the switchboard, this iPhone-ish user interface that contains all the easy-to-use functionality and that is ideal for seeing what the possibilities of the product are. We also talked about profiles, which is perhaps a little bit less intuitive, a little bit more complex to set up, but where you have access to the full potential of pdfToolbox Desktop, all of the functionality, and where you can configure things to a much higher extent than you could in the switchboard. So that's the second big part that we talked about. And then, of course, we also talked about this visualizer that allows you to look at a document. And let me change this limit again so that it doesn't look so horrible. That shows you in a very visual fashion a number of aspects of the PDF and whether those are good or not good. Those were the three main areas that we talked about, and that gives you a nice overview of what the functionality is inside of pdfToolbox desktop. Now, let me open up my webinar user interface here and see if there are questions that I can answer. First question is there any way to detect that bleeds are missing and then use the functionality that will add it? Yes, absolutely. There is a pre-flight check that detects whether or not bleed is missing. There are actually two things you can set up that are very, very similar. The first thing is you could detect that, for example, text comes too close to the trim box, detect whether the safety margin in a document is large enough. So that's something that you can easily use as a pre-flight check. And then you can also use a pre-flight check for bleed detection. And I'm not sure that I have something configured correctly. Let me see. As you can see, I can type in this checks or fixes or profiles window as well, and that shows me all of the items that have that in their name. I don't immediately see the bleed check that I was looking for. I can already see checks for the bleed box itself, but not exactly for bleed in there. So I'd have to look at creating another check probably for that. But you can definitely do that, and in some of the default profiles, that check is already built in. Second question, I wondered if there is a way of upsampling the resolution of an image using pdfToolbox, and I laugh a little because it's a very common question. And the answer actually is no, you cannot. You can downsample images, but pdfToolbox will not allow you to upsample an image. And that is mostly because it doesn't really make sense to do that. It doesn't gain you any quality. I realize that sometimes it may be necessary to upsample that image because you have to supply the file to someone else. It is not something at the moment that pdfToolbox allows you to do. Downsampling, yes. Downsampling and sharpening so that you keep the image quality nice is something that is definitely supported. The only workaround that you would have is, for example, use Acrobat to open an image in Photoshop and then upsample it there and then resave it into the PDF. That's something that you can do with the touch-up tool inside of Acrobat Professional, but at the moment you cannot do that with pdfToolbox. Can pdfToolbox correct total ink coverage? Also a very common question. The answer to that is yes. The way to do that is by using ICC profiles. There is, for example, a conversion to using ICC profiles, and that was a wrong click. I wanted to click on colors. If I click on color and I go to process conversion, you can see a very nice user interface to see how this file needs to be converted to CMYK, and the bottom part here allows me to select which profile to use. And if I go to custom for a second, I can now, for example, select this iso-coated V2 profile, which has an ink limit of 300%. And if I do that, if I convert that file with this profile, my ink coverage will be limited to 300%. Now, there is a slightly better solution, and that is, it's not always possible, but there is a slightly better solution by going into color and using a device link conversion. That requires that you have a device link profile that does a TAC reduction, so total area coverage reduction, or does ink save. But if you have a device link profile, then pdfToolbox can run that device link profile on your document, and the results that you get will be generally better than what you have when you use regular ICC profiles. That's just the nature of device link profiles. There is a payable option for pdfToolbox that will get you a list, and this is basically the list that gets you a list of predefined, pre-created device link profiles that you can use. But like I said before, if you have a tool that is able to create device link profiles, such as Copra from ColorLogic, then you can create your device link profile in Copra and then simply run it on your documents using pdfToolbox. And that will be a solution for the total ink coverage problem. This is more a question about PDF, perhaps. We're not a commercial printer, and we've not accepted PDF files in the past because we don't know that much about them. Where can I learn about the various PDF standards to know which standard fits our environment? Very good question. Without knowing more about your environment, it's a little bit difficult to comment, of course. In general, what I could say, and let me see if I could show you that link. So let me go to our support website for a second, support.4ps.com. I'll go to the tutorials section on there, and under tutorials, you can see a long list of webinar recordings. There is actually one that is called, it's a happy coincidence, there is one that is called PDF Preflight Standards, which I did a couple of weeks ago. And that is a webinar that talks about pre-flight standards from the ISO, that would be PDFX for graphic arts, but then also PDFX Plus standards from the Gantour group, such as that magazine ads profile that I used in the demo here, and then which profile to use, whether you should check or fix, and so on and so on. So this is a webinar of about an hour, I believe. And this would be a good one to watch and see if any of that information helps you. It talks very specifically about these standards, so that should be a good first step. If afterwards you still have specific questions about standards or about what to use in your environment, just fire off an email to us, support@4ps.com. And I'll be more than happy to look at your question. Okay, that is all the time I had available. It's also all the questions that were asked by you. Like I said, this is the first webinar of the summer school series. There will be 5 more every Wednesday in July and August, starting today. The others will be also about pdfToolbox, but also about more generic concepts like automation in pdfToolbox and T-Flow, production, and FileTrain. There is one about color and applications with color and creating profiles, which might be interesting if you are interested in the device link profile that we talked about here. There will probably be one about LPCal that still has to be announced, that one. There's probably going to be one about comparing PDF documents, both with pdfToolbox and some other great tools. So lots of great content. Have a look on our website to see what interests you and subscribe. And I look forward to seeing many of you again in those other webinars. Thank you very much for attending and have a great day.